auténtico. Se va con la pelota tirando la diagonal Rafinha. Intenta hacer el esfuerzo Jiménez. El balón para el Barça. Se va a quedar solo. ¡Gol!
Junta a todos los defensores y hay otro segundo duelo
que
es fundamental. El que pierde Nahuel Molina por ir poco contundente, creo yo.
Imagine being 18 years old. Most teenagers worry about exams, social media, or what they're going to do with their lives. Now imagine that overnight, millions of people across the world suddenly hate you. Not because of a crime, not because of a scandal, not because of something you said, but because of a football transfer. It sounds unbelievable, but that's exactly what happened to João Felix. For a brief moment, the young Portuguese wonder kid became one of the most criticized, mocked, and resented footballers on the planet. Everywhere he went online, people questioned him. Every performance was scrutinized. Every missed chance became a meme. And the craziest part? He was still a teenager. This is the story of how João Felix went from football's brightest young star to one of its biggest targets almost overnight. The boy nobody saw coming. Before the headlines, before the massive transfer fee, and before the criticism, João Felix was simply another talented kid trying to make it in Portugal. Born in Viseu, Portugal, he wasn't viewed as the next Cristiano Ronaldo. He wasn't considered a once-in-a-generation prodigy. In fact, his path was far from straightforward. As a youngster, he was even released by a club because coaches believed he was too physically small. For many players, that kind of rejection can destroy confidence. For João, it became motivation. He continued developing, refining his technical ability, intelligence, and creativity. Eventually, he joined Benfica's academy. That's where everything changed. The explosion at Benfica. By 2018, João Felix was beginning to attract attention. By 2019, he was impossible to ignore. Suddenly, this skinny teenager was producing moments of brilliance every week. Goals, assists, dribbles, vision, confidence. He played with a maturity far beyond his age. Fans compared him to legends. Scouts flooded stadiums to watch him. Europe's biggest clubs started preparing offers. Then came the performance that made everyone take notice. In the Europa League, João became one of the youngest players ever to score a hat trick in the competition. The football world immediately started asking the same question: who is this kid? And more importantly, how much is he worth? The transfer that changed everything. In the summer of 2019, Atletico Madrid made a shocking announcement. They had signed João Felix. The transfer fee? Approximately 126 million euros. At the time, it was one of the most expensive transfers in football history, and that's when everything changed. Because from that moment forward, João Felix was no longer judged as a 19-year-old footballer. He was judged as a 126 million euro footballer. And those are two very different things. The problem with big price tags. Football fans love wonder kids. They love watching young players develop. They celebrate potential. They forgive mistakes. Until a massive transfer fee enters the conversation. Once Atletico Madrid spent over 100 million euros on João Felix, expectations became unrealistic. People didn't want development, they wanted domination. Immediately, fans expected him to score every week. They expected him to replace club legends. They expected him to justify every single euro. The problem? He was still a teenager learning the game. Most young players are allowed to make mistakes. João Felix wasn't. Every mistake became a headline. Living in Cristiano Ronaldo's shadow, being Portuguese made the pressure even worse. Because Portugal already had one football icon, Cristiano Ronaldo. Every talented Portuguese player gets compared to him. But João Felix received those comparisons at an extreme level. Media outlets called him the next Ronaldo. Fans debated whether he could become Portugal's future superstar. Pundits predicted Ballon d'Or trophies. The expectations became impossible. Because nobody becomes Cristiano Ronaldo. Not even Cristiano Ronaldo happened by accident. His career was one of the most extraordinary achievements in sports history. Yet João Felix was constantly measured against that standard. Anything less than greatness felt like failure. Atletico Madrid wasn't built for him. Another factor many people ignored was the environment. João Felix joined Atletico Madrid under coach Diego Simeone. Simeone is one of football's greatest managers. But his system has traditionally emphasized discipline, defensive structure, and tactical responsibility. João Felix thrived on freedom, creativity, expression, risk-taking. The fit was never perfect. Many observers believed he was trying to adapt to a style that didn't naturally suit his strengths. As a result, performances became inconsistent. Some matches showed flashes of genius. Others disappeared completely. Fans grew frustrated, criticism increased, and social media became ruthless. The internet turns against him. Modern football is different from previous eras. Young players don't just face criticism from newspapers or television. They face millions of opinions every day. One bad match can create thousands of negative posts. One missed chance can generate endless memes. João Felix became one of social media's favorite targets. People mocked his transfer fee, questioned his talent, called him overrated, claimed he was a flop. The criticism became constant. And unlike older generations of footballers, there was no escape. The comments followed him everywhere. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. Every platform amplified the negativity. For a player barely out of his teens, it was an extraordinary amount of pressure. Was he actually a failure? Here's where the story gets interesting. If you listen to online discussions, you would think João Felix was one of football's biggest disasters. But reality looked very different. He contributed goals, created chances, won matches, played for elite clubs, represented Portugal at major tournaments, and remained highly valued by coaches and scouts. The problem wasn't that he was bad. The problem was that he wasn't immediately worth 126 million euros. There's a huge difference. Most footballers would be considered successful with João Felix's achievements, but because of the transfer fee, the standard became almost impossible to reach. Anything short of superstardom felt disappointing. The Chelsea and Barcelona chapters. As time passed, João Felix sought fresh starts. Loan moves and transfers created opportunities to rebuild his reputation. At Chelsea, glimpses of his talent remained obvious. At Barcelona, he produced moments that reminded everyone why Europe once considered him one of the brightest young stars in football. The technical ability never disappeared. The intelligence never disappeared. The creativity never disappeared. What changed was the narrative. Some fans began reassessing his career. Instead of asking why he wasn't a superstar, they started appreciating the player he actually was. A highly talented footballer navigating extraordinary expectations. The real villain. Expectations. If there's a lesson in João Felix's story, it's this. Sometimes expectations can become more damaging than failure itself. João Felix didn't become hated because he lacked talent. He became hated because people expected miracles. They expected him to instantly justify one of football's largest transfer fees. They expected him to become Cristiano Ronaldo's successor. They expected him to dominate one of Europe's toughest leagues as a teenager. Those expectations weren't created by João Felix. They were created around him. And once they became unrealistic, disappointment was almost inevitable. What football fans often forget. Football supporters sometimes forget how young these players actually are. At 19 years old, most people are still discovering who they are. They're making mistakes, learning, growing. Yet elite footballers are expected to perform under pressure that most adults could never handle. Millions watching, millions judging, millions commenting. João Felix experienced that reality earlier than almost anyone. And while many players struggle privately under similar circumstances, his challenges unfolded publicly for the entire world to see. The redemption story is still being written. Unlike many football rise and fall stories, João Felix's journey isn't over. He's still playing, still developing, still capable of producing moments of brilliance. His story remains unfinished. Maybe he'll eventually fulfill the extraordinary expectations placed upon him. Maybe he'll forge a completely different path. Either way, his career serves as a reminder of how quickly public opinion can change. One year, you're football's golden boy. The next year, you're everyone's favorite target. And sometimes, neither label accurately reflects reality. Conclusion. João Felix didn't become one of the most hated footballers on the planet because he committed a scandal or failed spectacularly. He became a target because he was a teenager carrying impossible expectations, a 126 million euro price tag, comparisons to Cristiano Ronaldo, pressure from fans, media, and social media, all before most people finish university. The world expected a superstar overnight. Instead, they got something much more human, a young footballer trying to find his place at the highest level of the sport. And perhaps that's the untold truth of João Felix's story. He wasn't hated because of who he was. He was hated because of who people expected him to become. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, subscribe for more football documentaries and untold football stories, and comment below with the next player or football mystery you'd like us to cover.